What happens when one of Hollywood's greatest living legends sits down for what should have been a cordial morning interview, only to find himself the target of relentless mockery? He expected a warm welcome, a few questions about his latest film, and maybe a little light banter. Instead, what he got was a verbal ambush that tested his legendary composure to the breaking point. The morning began like countless others at the talk show studio. In the control room, producers barked orders into headsets. Camera operators adjusted their shots. The hosts sipped coffee and skimmed cue cards, preparing for what they thought would be another easy segment. The audience was buzzing. Today's guest was a Hollywood icon with 2 Academy Awards, a man whose presence alone could fill a room. He arrived without fanfare, dark navy suit, crisp white shirt, polished shoes, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who has nothing left to prove. Backstage, he posed for a quick photo, exchanged polite greetings with crew, and took his place in the green room. At the host table, though, the energy was different. One host in particular seemed unusually charged, flipping through her notes with a smirk that promised trouble. "I've got some real questions for him today," she told a nearby producer. The response was a nervous chuckle and a swift retreat. "Let's keep it about the movie," another host urged quietly. But the smirk only deepened. "Oh, please. I'm not letting him skate by with his usual short answers. People want the truth." The opening music hit. Applause roared. The introduction was warm and glowing, every word dripping with praise for the man's long, extraordinary career. The audience erupted when he walked out, offering that half-smile that could disarm or intimidate, depending on the moment. He shook hands, sat down, and gave a soft, "happy to be here." The first questions were easy. His process. His favorite collaborators. He spoke with care, his voice steady, each answer thoughtful and deliberate. The audience listened closely, leaning in to every word. Then it happened. Leaning forward with her chin in her hand, the host smiled, a smile that wasn't entirely friendly. "So, you've been playing the same brooding, mumbling guy for what, 50 years now? Doesn't it ever get boring? Or are you just phoning it in at this point?" The words hung in the air like a cold draft. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. The other hosts froze. He looked at her, expression calm but eyes sharper now. "I'm sorry, what?" She shrugged, feigning innocence. "Come on. The mobster. The angry dad. The grumpy old man. Same thick New York accent. Don't you ever think about switching it up? Or are you sticking with what's safe?" He leaned back, folding his hands. A small chuckle escaped, not amusement, but disbelief. "You really think those are the same character?" "Well," she shot back, "if it quacks like a duck." The crowd chuckled awkwardly. His head tilted slightly, studying her like a scene partner who just went wildly off script. Then, with the weight of someone who has lived and breathed his craft for decades, he said, "Every character I've played has been different. Maybe you're only seeing what you want to see." She smiled wider, enjoying the tension. "Or maybe you're just too comfortable. You know, some people say you've been coasting for years, just showing up and being you." A loud gasp swept through the audience. The other hosts exchanged alarmed glances. One tried to cut in, but the moment had taken on a life of its own. This was no longer a promotional interview. This was a duel. And only one of them would walk away with their dignity fully intact. "Tell me," she pressed, her tone deceptively casual, "do you ever worry people are just humoring you now? That no one dares tell the big, scary movie star he's lost his touch?" The words hit the air like a gunshot. His hands tightened ever so slightly on the table, but his expression didn't budge. "I don't waste time on things I can't control," he replied, voice calm and measured. "And I don't measure my work by what critics or talk show hosts think." But she wasn't finished. Leaning closer, she lowered her voice to a mock whisper for the audience. "And that accent, seriously, do you ever get tired of playing that whatever it is? The tough guy Bronx mumble? Or is that just who you are now? One big cliché." The studio went silent. Even the camera operators seemed to pull back. He straightened slowly, locking eyes with her. There was no heat in his gaze, only a steel-edged calm honed by decades of surviving egos, critics, and the occasional cheap shot. "You've got a sharp tongue," he said quietly. Maybe too sharp for your own good. The silence after that was deafening. One of the other hosts coughed, trying to pivot back to the film, but the moment had already shifted. She only smiled, like she'd landed a private victory. The air felt heavy now, charged with static. The audience, who had come ready to cheer for a beloved star, sat frozen, unsure if they were watching a talk show or a bare-knuckle fight. "Don't look at me like that," she said, folding her arms smugly. "I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking. Maybe it's time someone told you the truth instead of kissing your Oscar-winning feet." A few awkward laughs broke out, more from discomfort than amusement. Another host shot a pleading look toward the control booth, silently begging for a commercial break, but no one intervened. He finally spoke again, his voice low but cutting clean through the room. "If you've got a real question, I'll answer it. But if all you've got is insults, you're wasting everyone's time." She laughed, loud, sharp, almost surprised at herself. "Oh, I've got plenty of questions. Here's one. Do you even act anymore? Or do you just show up, squint, mumble a few lines, and let everyone else do the heavy lifting?" The audience gasped. A few whispered, "Oh my God," as if they were watching someone poke a sleeping lion. "Acting is listening," he said evenly. "It's reacting. It's not about who shouts the loudest or waves their arms the widest. Maybe you don't understand that." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "I've seen your movies. Same face, same raspy voice. It's like watching someone read the phone book with an attitude. That's not acting. That's coasting." He blinked once, twice, then tilted his head slightly. "Coasting," he repeated, tasting the word. "You know, people said the same thing about Brando. They didn't understand him either." She barked a laugh. "Brando? Don't even start. At least he had the decency to disappear before becoming a parody of himself." This time, the words landed like a slap. Even she seemed to realize she might have pushed too far, but she covered it with another smirk. He leaned forward, forearms on the table, voice steady. "You've got a lot to say about a craft you've never practiced." Her eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me. You sit here, day after day, tearing down people who actually go out and do something. You think snide comments make you an expert? They don't." "Oh, so now you're lecturing me," she snapped. "What, am I supposed to bow down because you once played a mob boss?" "I'm saying respect is a two-way street," he said firmly. "You invited me here to talk about my work, but instead you're trying to turn this into your own little roast." The audience shifted uneasily. Some glanced toward the doors, as if bracing for an exit or an explosion. She leaned in again, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Ah, did I hurt the tough guy's feelings?" He didn't blink, didn't smile. He just looked at her, the way a man looks at a storm on the horizon, knowing it's coming, but refusing to be moved. And the tension in the room. It was only just beginning. "A poor thing," she said with a smirk. "Can't handle a few hard truths? Maybe you should stick to movies where nobody talks back to you." He chuckled, dry, humorless. "You think this is hard? Please. I've sat in a freezing Montana river for 12 hours while a director shouted at me between takes. I've been ripped apart by critics who actually knew what they were talking about." "Oh, so now you're a martyr," she shot back. "Give me a break. You actors love to pretend you're suffering artists when really, you're just overpaid pretenders." He shook his head slowly, his tone still measured, though a faint steel edge slipped in. "You're confusing money with meaning. They're not the same thing. You wouldn't understand that." Her cheeks flushed. "Wouldn't understand? Oh, that's rich. You think playing tough guys on screen makes you better than everyone else?" He locked eyes with her, voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "I don't think I'm better than anyone. But I do know the difference between criticism and cruelty. Maybe you should learn it." The studio froze. Even the faint hum of the lights seemed louder. "Oh, don't worry," she said with a thin smile. "I know exactly what I'm doing, and so do you." The other hosts sat in rigid silence, eyes darting toward the control booth. The audience, who had come expecting charm and movie anecdotes, now sat stiff, unsure if they should clap or just hold their breath. He looked at her, jaw tightening slightly. His stillness spoke volumes. But she misread it, mistaking restraint for defeat. "You know your problem," she pressed, leaning forward like a predator circling prey. "You think that because you've stood in front of a camera for 50 years, you're untouchable. But you're not. You're just another aging actor who forgot his lines somewhere around 1997. The crowd gasped. A couple of faint boos followed, but she didn't flinch. He exhaled slowly. "You really like hearing yourself talk, don't you?" "That's rich," she sneered. "Coming from a man who's made a career out of mumbling lines no one can understand. Tell me, do you ever enunciate, or is that beneath you?" The corner of his mouth twitched, part disbelief, part dark amusement. "When you've worked with directors like Scorsese and Coppola," he said evenly, "you don't need to shout to be heard. They know how to listen." She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, please. Spare me the great artist routine. I've seen your movies lately. Half the time, you're just playing yourself, a grumpy old man with a bad New York accent." Something in his posture changed, subtle but unmistakable. He sat back, folded his hands deliberately, and fixed her with a gaze so cold it could have iced over the cameras. "My accent," he said softly, "is the voice of the people I grew up with. My family. My neighborhood. That grumpy old man you keep mocking, that's me. And I've never pretended otherwise." She chuckled, misreading the quiet intensity. "Well, maybe it's time you stop hiding behind that and actually, I don't know, act." The words echoed in the dead silence. Even the audience seemed to stop breathing. He leaned forward just slightly, voice calm but with an edge sharp enough to cut glass. "You know what's funny? You're right about one thing. I am playing myself these days. Because after all these years in this business, I've earned the right to tell my story my way. Maybe you should try that sometime, instead of spending your career tearing everyone else down." The pause that followed wasn't empty, it was electric. The studio felt like a fuse had been lit, and everyone was waiting to see what would explode first. For the first time, Joy's smirk faltered, just for a fraction of a second, before she caught herself and doubled down. Her chin lifted, her voice sharpened. "Don't lecture me about my career," she snapped, leaning forward like a challenger in the ring. "You walk in here with your holier-than-thou attitude, like you're doing us all a favor just by showing up. But here's the newsflash, Bobby. Nobody's impressed anymore." Her words hit the air like a slap, the syllables echoing in the stunned quiet of the studio. A few audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Robert's hands tightened into fists against the polished table, knuckles whitening, but his voice stayed even, measured. "You're right," he said finally. "I'm not here to impress you. I'm here because the people watching at home, real people, still care about stories. About movies. About what we do." "Oh, please," Joy sneered, rolling her eyes as if dismissing an amateur. "They care about watching celebrities embarrass themselves. That's why they tune in. And congratulations, by the way, you're delivering." That jab landed hard. A murmur rippled through the audience, some gasps, a few disapproving groans. Robert straightened slowly, his movements deliberate, then reached to button his jacket as though preparing to end the conversation. But instead of standing, he paused, leaning forward with both palms pressed firmly on the table. "You know," he began, his tone steady but underpinned with steel, "you sit here every morning thinking you're clever, thinking you're doing the world a service by keeping it real. But what you're really doing is making it harder for the people who are actually trying." Joy gave a theatrical sigh, tilting her head back. "Oh, here we go. The noble actor speech." Robert's eyes narrowed slightly. "I've been in this business for half a century. I've seen what it does to people, the highs, the destruction. And you," he leaned just slightly toward her, "you're part of the problem. You've turned cruelty into a sport. You've made a career out of taking cheap shots at people who are just trying to do their jobs." Joy crossed her arms, her expression sharpening into something colder. "And you've made a career out of playing the same grumpy caricature of yourself. Congratulations." This time Robert stood. He didn't slam the chair back, didn't raise his voice, but his height alone shifted the energy in the room. The tension thickened. His gaze stayed locked on hers. "You know, Joy," he said evenly, I thought this was supposed to be a conversation. Turns out it was an ambush. And I'm done pretending otherwise." The audience erupted in low murmurs, a scattering of claps breaking through. The other hosts sat frozen, Alyssa's lips pressed into a thin line, Sunny's eyes fixed on the table, Sarah glancing helplessly toward the wings where producers were gesturing wildly. Joy pushed back her chair and rose too, her indignation giving her an equal height to match his stance. "Oh, don't you dare play the victim here, Robert. You walked in with that smug grin thinking you'd charm your way through this. But you can't handle being called out, can you?" Robert stared at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter but sharper, cutting through the space between them. "I can handle a lot of things," he said. "But not this. Not the circus." And with that, he turned away from the table. Joy remained standing, fists curling at her sides, her face flushed, part triumph, part something more difficult to place. Regret, maybe. Or fear. The cameras caught every flicker. Robert paused at the edge of the set, as if deciding whether to add a final word. He glanced back once, eyes scanning the table, the hosts, and finally Joy. But he said nothing. Instead, he adjusted his jacket, squared his shoulders, and began walking toward the exit, each step deliberate. The air in the studio was thick, electric. Even the faint hum of the lights seemed louder. For a moment, time slowed, Robert's footsteps the only sound. His hand brushed along the side of his jacket, almost like he was shaking off whatever clung to him in that space. He was leaving, and nothing would stop him. Then Joy's voice cut through the stillness, sharp and venomous. "That's right, Bobby. Walk away. That's what you do best, isn't it? Walk away before anyone has the chance to see you for what you really are, a washed-up has been clinging to the scraps of a career that's already over." The words detonated like a thunderclap. The audience gasped. Some booed. Alyssa covered her mouth, Sunny looked down at her lap, and Sarah's eyes darted toward the control booth. The producers waved frantically for a commercial break, but it was too late. Robert stopped mid-stride. The quiet in the studio was deafening. Slowly, he turned back, his expression unreadable, though the fire in his eyes betrayed his calm demeanor. He walked back to the table, each step deliberate, his presence commanding the room. "You know what, Joy," he began, voice low and controlled, yet charged with the weight of decades of experience. "You've said a lot about me in the last 20 minutes. My career, my craft, my so-called failures. But none of it bothers me as much as the fact that you actually believe tearing someone else down makes you bigger." Joy opened her mouth, but Robert lifted a hand. She fell silent. "I've played gangsters, soldiers, fathers, mentors. I've won awards I never dreamed of as a kid in a working-class New York neighborhood. And not once did I have to humiliate another person to feel important." The audience erupted into hesitant applause, growing louder as he continued. "You sit here every day and talk about people's lives like they're punchlines. You mock their failures. You minimize their struggles. You pretend it's keeping it real, but it's cruelty dressed up as entertainment." Joy's face reddened, her hands gripping the table until her knuckles whitened. "I may be old," Robert went on, "and maybe at the tail end of my career. But I still wake up proud of my work. Can you say the same? When you look in the mirror, are you proud of what you see?" For a heartbeat, something flickered in Joy's eyes, quickly buried beneath her smirk. Robert shook his head. "I don't need to defend myself to you. My work speaks for itself. My life speaks for itself. I came here to talk about art, about the beauty of cinema. Instead, I walked into a firing squad disguised as a talk show." The silence was absolute. "And for the record," he added, voice soft but carrying, "I'd rather mumble the truth than shout a lie." He gave a small nod to the other hosts and turned toward the exit. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out, Bobby," Joy called, her voice cracking. Without turning, Robert replied, "It won't. But someday, when you're alone, thinking about everyone you've hurt, you'll realize you never won anything, because you never learned how to treat people with respect." And then he was gone. The studio stayed frozen for several moments. The audience murmured, some applauding softly, others shaking their heads. Joy sat stiffly, staring at the empty doorway, her smirk gone at last. In the hours that followed, Clips of the confrontation spread like wildfire online. People debated fiercely. Had Joy been holding him accountable, or had she crossed the line? One thing was certain: Robert De Niro had walked away with his dignity intact, leaving behind one of the most unforgettable moments in live television. What do you think? Did Robert handle it the right way, or was Joy justified? Share your thoughts below, and if you want more intense, unfiltered stories like this, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss the next one.